want to talk to you about distributing to a private or public maven repository. I think the title is pretty self-explanatory. Maybe a bit about me. I'm Belgian, I'm Dutch speaking natively, and I currently live and work in Antwerp for a small company called Icapps. And we focus mostly on mobile apps, but we also do a bit of backend. So we offer like a full package to our customers. First of all, let's take a step back, because before software development, before you're going to build stuff that you're going to reuse, it actually needs to be usable. This talk will not go in depth on that. So there's plenty of things to consider there, like how to design an API, how to make sure that it matches the needs of your customers. But I won't cover that here, so that's just something that we're going to take as a given. So let's start with some fundamentals about Maven. Who here knows what Maven is? Okay, that's pretty good news, so I can cover that quite quickly then. So Maven, among a lot of things, is a repository manager, but you can also use it as a build system. It's fairly extensive what you can do with it. But the way it's currently used on Android is it's integrated in Android Studio, and you can simply search Maven for certain libraries, and then you can very easily include them in Gradle and then build them into your app. There's versioning built in, and there's also the guarantee that the library you're using will be there forever. So having that covered, let's see how Maven actually stores artifacts. This is extremely straightforward. So what Maven will do is, for every library, it will just keep multiple versions, and all of those versions it's going to store in just a set of folders, a predefined set of folders. It's first going to be some folders describing the package name, and then the artifact name, and then the version. So it's very straightforward. Just think of Maven as a set of directories with a couple of files in it. It's really nothing more than that. And in those directories, it will then store multiple artifacts if you release a library. So you could have the library itself, but you can also include javadoc, sources.jar, or you can include some extra things. And then it's also going to hold a project object model. What that is, it's basically an XML. And that XML contains a lot of metadata about your project. So you can put the author in there, the version in there. Maybe if you have some other external dependencies, which license it's under, and stuff like that, you can all put in there. Why am I showing this? Mostly just to get this terminology straight. These are three terms that you're going to see a lot during this presentation. This is how Maven actually identifies artifacts. So first of all, you have a group ID. By group ID, you basically identify a developer. So for instance, in the case that I was showing earlier, you had Jake Wharton, so that's com.jakewharton, and then all of the libraries Jake Wharton has will be under that group ID. So you can have Butterknife, you will have Hugo, Timber, he has a lot of libraries. We all know them. So all of the libraries will have a different name, which is the artifact ID in Maven slang. And then finally, for every library, you can have multiple versions. All right? Okay, having that covered, let's see what you do then, actually, with Maven. So if you want to use it in our Android project, we just have to define where the repository is, which you can do with the Gradle DSL, fairly straightforward. So this, you can refer it to a default repository, but you can also just use the default one, which is JCenter for Android Studio. I will come back to that a bit more later on. And then dependencies, Gradle actually supports three kinds of dependencies. First of all, there's just local dependencies in a file. So this is the libs folder. So every jar file you put in a libs folder, you can use it in your project. You can also have a local Maven repository. I don't think if a lot of people know that, but everyone who has Android Studio installed or the Android SDK installed on their PC will also have a local Maven repository installed. And the reason for that is every time you start a new Android project, there's many libraries that you're going to reuse all of the time. So like the design support library, the app compat library, you're going to reuse them almost in every project. So it doesn't make sense to always go ahead and download them, because if you're then untrained and you want to start a new project, then it wouldn't work. So that's why Android stores them in a local Maven repository. You can just go to the Android SDK directory, and you can see it there under M2 repository, and then you can see the group IDs and the artifact IDs. It's pretty straightforward. And then finally, you can also just use a remote artifact which is what we do most of the time, I guess. And here you can see the terminology coming back. So you have the group ID separated by a column, the artifact ID, and then a column, and then the version. So this is typically what we're all used to, right? So what this talk will be about is getting to a point where we can just put this in our code and then start reusing our library, or that other developers can put it into their code and start reusing it. All right. This is a very good quote that's appropriate to that, because it's actually not that hard to do so, but there's fairly little documentation about it, and it's not really straightforward. There's a lot of steps involved, so I'm going to go about and explain to you how you can actually make it happen and make it easy. So the first part of this talk will be public distribution, and then public Maven repositories. There's actually two of them. If you have paid close attention to the automatically generated build.gradle files, then you would have seen that it used to be Maven Central, which is there by default in your top level project build.gradle file, and now it's switched to JCenter. Now basically, they're not that different, but they're just two completely different Maven repositories. This one is hosted by Sonatype, which is a community-driven solution. And it's a bit less friendly to use. And this one, JCenter, is driven by a company, which makes it a lot easier to use, which is Bintray. But they host a lot of the same artifacts in them. It's not going to be a one-on-one match, but for our purposes, I would say that most of the artifacts you're going to use will be both in Maven Central as in JCenter. So I just recommend using this one by default. Now, imagine if you want to start uploading to those. Let's take Nexus first. So this is the community-driven one. And long story short, it's a pain to set up. There's a community behind it, and the community is really friendly. They do help you out. So it's not like you're stuck, but it's very complicated. There's no clear interface. For instance, if you want to start uploading a library, you need to register yourself on their Jira, create an issue there, wait for someone to comment on the issue, and then to make all of the configuration on their server so you can start uploading a library. So doing that takes a week just of time you have to wait before they respond. And then secondly, it's mandatory that you sign your artifacts, so you need to install a tool called GNU-GP, you need to generate a key pair, a public-private key pair, then you need to distribute your public key to a public key server so they can verify your identity and blah, blah, blah. It all takes quite some effort to set up. And furthermore, if you want to upload an artifact to it, you can only do it via command line or via Gradle. They don't provide you an easy interface to just go to a website and then upload an artifact. So basically that's everything about Nexus. So let's go a bit more in depth. So this is the Jira. This is my library, landscape video camera. I created a small library which allows you only to film when you're in landscape, and if you're in portrait, it will stop filming. A very annoying thing, a lot of people do make portrait videos, so it's done when you use this library. So I created a Jira issue. Within the week they responded and they set up everything for me. They were very kind. I have no comments on that or no complaints about that whatsoever. It's just a bit tedious to set up. Now, if you want to upload them, so how does it look to do the upload in Gradle? I'm going to go over this quite quickly because there exists a script which you can simply reuse. It's developed by Chris Baines. He works at Google. I think he works on the design support library currently. And he made a very simple script. And all the script expects is some parameters to be there in the gradle.properties file. And if you set those parameters right, which is a very straightforward process, then you can just run the right Gradle command and you're good to go. So therefore, I'm going to provide you the link at the end of the slides, but I'm not going to treat it in depth here. So this first is in your user home directory. You can also add a gradle.properties file. That's then local on your PC. You can never check it in accidentally into Git. So there you can store more sensitive information like your password, the keychain ID, and so on. So you put all of that in there. And then you need to have some configuration for your project itself. You will see here the typical things coming back like version, the group ID, the artifact name is then generated based on the name of your library and so on. It's all pretty straightforward. You can have a look at it at your own pace, but I'm quite sure you're going to manage that. It's more like the signing and yeah, the Jira issue which is going to hold you back and not really this. Okay, so imagine if you then want to use it, so you create those two files, you put the right properties in there, and then you apply the script that Chris Baines has made, and then secondly, you just run this command, and your build will be uploaded to, not yet to Maven Central, it will be uploaded to Nexus. And the reason for that is, imagine if you run this command by accident, you don't want to go and push libraries just to Maven Central, because once you push it there, it will be there forever. You cannot pull it away from that or anything, so you would have to upload a new version then. So to avoid that, there's like an intermediary layer in between. So whenever you run this command, you end up in a staging environment. Yeah, this really isn't easy to see, but this is the staging environment. Your build will end up in here. You can then take the build, you can even already include it in your Gradle file, so you can test everything to see if it's working. And then this button should say promote, and then you just promote your release. You wait for a couple of hours and it will be there in Maven Central. That's fairly straightforward, right? Okay, cool. Then bin tray. So what I said, bin tray is exactly the same as Nexus is, only here there's a company behind it and they have an interest driving users to their project, and they also have the resources to do so. So everything is a lot easier. You just have like a web interface where you create an account, you can create your own package, no Jira issues there, so a lot easier. You don't need to go ahead and sign your artifacts. You can even do a manual upload, so you can go to a website and just say like add release, and you just upload the right files, and then you can do the release already. So bin tray is actually a lot easier to use. Imagine if you want to use it. So this is the interface, how it looks like. So this is again my library, which is on bin tray. So it's a lot easier to see all of your settings and parameters. Yeah, okay. If we then want to upload artifacts, there's a guy called Brian Atwell. He works at Uber. He also has written some scripts which do the upload for you. So it's again the same story. This time he used the local.properties file to store information in. He could have also used the gradle.properties file, but he chose to do that. Do not check it into version control, obviously. And then, yeah, you set some properties. You make sure that you add the dependencies on the build script. And then you also set the right properties in your build.gradle file. I'm not going to go over here in depth completely. It's going to be straightforward once you look at it. But you can already see like the group ID, the library name, the artifact, the version, all of those things, they're always coming back. It's always going to be a similar thing. So once you've done all of that, then you can just run bin tray upload and you're good to go. Very easy. All right. Why was I also covering that so quickly? That's because now there's a new kit in town called jetpack. Who has heard about jetpack before? Yeah, it's something you should have a look at because they make this entire process extremely easy for you. What jetpack actually does is it can build any GitHub project or any Bitbucket project. They support multiple repositories, and they can just provide you access to it as if it was a Maven repository. So you don't need to create an account, you don't need to do anything. As a matter of fact, if you now have some code hosted on GitHub currently today, then Jetpack is already hosting it for you. So this is a very convenient, easy to use solution. And for my library, I also moved to this because I didn't want to go through the hassle of always going to the website and manually promoting the artifact and so on. Yeah, so it's a lot easier to use. So to actually upload artifacts, that's a non-issue currently because Jetpack just does it automatically for you. So the only thing I need to explain is how do you use stuff from Jetpack. You add Jetpack as a Maven repository, fairly straightforward. And then you can just reference any library on GitHub by using com.github and then the developer name. then you specify the repository name, and then the version. That's all. And this version is actually simply the Git tag you're referring to. So all you have to do as a developer is just tag your builds with a release tag, and then Jetpack will just start building them for you. One other interesting thing that Jetpack can do is, instead of defining a tag, you could also just define a git commit hash, and then it will just build that hash for you. So wrapping everything up about the public distribution, if you want to do this, just do Jetpack, and whenever you think like, yeah, maybe I want to scale because I want to provide users like easy access from Android Studio, that you end up in the search when the user searches in Android Studio, then do Bintray. And Nexus, yeah, I just wouldn't do Nexus. That's a bit too cumbersome to set up. All right. The second part of my talk is, what if you now want to reuse code within your own company or organization, but you don't want to make it publicly available on Maven Central or JCenter? How would you go about doing something like that? Again, a little disclaimer here, whether or not that's a good idea, but that's your call to make, not part of this presentation. So private distribution, there's a solution called Artifactory. Who has heard about Artifactory? Yeah, okay, one guy in the audience. Well, Artifactory is actually, it's built by the same people that built Bintray, so it's also built by JFrog. It's open source and free to use. And what it can do is actually two things. First, it's a Maven repository, so you can host library releases in there. And secondly, it can also act as a feed-through to Maven repositories. So you could, if you want, within your organization, just only declare a dependency on your own hosted Artifactory instance. And then to Artifactory, you can say, if a user asks for a certain build, then go ahead and look in these repositories remotely. And what will happen then is Artifactory will cache all of those libraries that you're using. So that means that the first time someone in your company uses Action Bar Sherlock, it will be downloaded from Maven Central. The second time somebody uses it, it will just come from your local instance Artifactory. So by that you could save bandwidth, which could especially be interesting if you have a build server which always does a clean before it builds. So then you don't have the time, or you don't have the overhead of having to go and download the artifacts all over again every time. So they also provide a Gradle plugin to do the uploads, and they have some really cool advanced features where you can have like very granular user access to define like this user is able to access this repository. You can create like snapshot releases, you can create normal releases, so it's very feature rich and it's free to use, so it's quite nice. There's two remarks I need to make there. One is, imagine if you install Artifactory, they have a 1-minute setup video on their website, so it's really, really straightforward. Imagine if you install it, that's good and all, but then it will run on your local machine. So yeah, that's not going to be sufficient. You're going to have to run it on a server so everyone within your company can access it. But then also there's some cost and hassle involved of running and maintaining that server, because it also needs to be available from external, from your company, and so on. So that's something Artifactory can also solve for you, but then you have to pay for it. If you want to do that yourself, then you need to go to the cost and hassle yourself. Same thing with backups. You can tell Artifactory to make a backup to a certain folder. But then, yeah, if the folder is on the same PC, it's not really a backup. So then actually doing the backup, that's also still going to be on you. Just an FYI, so you know. If you look at the interface, yeah, it's again very intuitive. There's a company, they probably have a designer that helps them, and Nexus does not have that. So it's very easy, clear to set up, a very clear interface. And then to upload artifacts, they offer you a Gradle plugin, which you declare a dependency on that plugin. So you add it to your class path. And then you have to configure the plugin. So we're going to apply the plugin. Yeah, maybe I just have to go to it step by step. Yeah, you have to apply the plugin. So it's the Artifactory plugin and also the default Maven plugin. Once you have applied those, we need to do some configuration to tell it this is going to be the group ID, the version, the artifact ID. all straightforward. Again, this is like the default Maven terminology that we have come across a couple of times already. And then, yeah, that's one thing you need to do is you need to point it explicitly to this is the release that I want to upload. And this is just one line, you can copy it, which does that for you. Okay, then let's see. So this was the configuration for the Maven plugin, actually. So now let's configure the artifactory plugin. We need to point it to where we are running our instance of artifactory. This is just on the PC where I installed it on, but if you, you can also run it on a server or something like that, then you need to provide the right IP or domain to refer, as a Maven URL. And then we're gonna say like, okay, so within our artifactory instance, you can create multiple sub-repositories. So we now say like, okay, I want to go to libs release local, so that's just the one repository I defined. You can define multiple of them, so you could also have like a snapshot repository or something like that. And then you provide it with the username and password to actually do the upload. So the username and password, obviously don't put it in your build.gradle file like this. So also do the same trick that we did with build.properties that you store in your root directory. And then you should be fine. Okay, so that's that. And then to actually do the upload, just run this command and then you're good to go. Let's see, if you then want to consume the artifacts, again we have to define the Maven URL, so we point it to our artifactory instance, and we actually say this is the sub artifactory repository that we want to use. And then the same like we were doing with the public Maven repository, you just define the group ID, the library name, and then the version to start using it. So you can see the same thing coming back and back again. So that's everything for Artifactory. Now I shortly want to discuss something else that I found, and this is actually something I find very interesting myself. This is the Maven plugin, Wagon Git. It's also open source. And what this does is it allows you to convert any kind of Git repository into a Maven repository. So probably every company already has a solution to host their source codes, and it's usually hosted on a remote server or something, so backups are a given. Also remote access is a given. So imagine if you just put your Maven repository in that, it will just blend into your workflow like it already does. And you don't have to configure anything for that. So this plugin can make that happen for you. Okay, it's also open source. So let's see how we can configure that. So again, it's always going to be the same. You always have to provide a version, a name, and a group ID, and also the package that you're going to upload. So that's something that we see coming back again and again. By the way, the Wagon Git, it works with both GitHub and Bitbucket repositories. I'm now going to give the example for Bitbucket, because Bitbucket by default offers free private repositories, and GitHub does not. So that's why I thought Bitbucket would be a more interesting example, but it works the same for GitHub if you want. So then you defined your team on GitHub, your company name, and also the repository where you want to store the artifacts in. And then you need to do a little trick. I will explain later why we need this, but you need to base 64 encode exactly this string, username, colon, password. There's online tools to do the encoding, and then you just also have to provide that in your build, in your gradle.properties file. I'll explain later why we need that. So let's see, doing the upload, we apply the Maven plugin, because that's the one that's doing the actual upload. We now tell it, okay, I want you to do the upload to this repository. And if you look at the DSL, it looks a bit weird. It's git colon releases, blah, blah, blah. But this is a DSL which is imposed by the Git Wagon plugin. So it's something they invented and what they will understand. And then, the usual suspects, we need to actually link the artifact to the right properties before we do the upload. One thing I want to highlight here is that we have to define a custom configuration, deploy library. Just pin that somewhere in the back of your mind, and I will come back to that later, why we need it. Okay, then now we come up to a big limitation of Git wagon, and that is, it doesn't know whether or not the repository already exists. So imagine if you make a V1 release of your library, then you could just run git wagon 10 times in a row or 100 times in a row, and it would just overwrite the existing library, which is inherent to Git because that's how we version our files, but it's something that you really don't want for a Maven repository because every release you make needs to be there, it needs to be exactly the same artifact, so we never want to overwrite it accidentally. So in order to accommodate for that, I've written some code which just does a call to the Bitbucket APIs to see if the artifact is already existing. If it is existing, then we don't do the upload. If it does not exist, then we will do the upload. Okay, I'm running almost out of time, so I'm going to quickly go over that. So Git stores files on a directory basis. So what we just need to do is we need to reverse engineer the URL on Bitbucket where the file should be hosted. Once we have that, then we append, so the path to the file we append it to the Bitbucket API base URL, and then we just check if the URL exists. If it exists, we throw a runtime exception that will cause Gradle to fail. If it doesn't exist, then we just continue. And then, that task to look for existing artifacts, we make it dependent. We make the upload archives task dependent on that. This is the task that will actually do the Gradle upload, and it's now always going to first run this one whenever we run that one. So that's just something we put there as a security precaution. Checking to see if the URL exists. I'm really not going to go into the details. This is almost the same as you would do in Java. I just check to see if the file exists. If I get a 200, then it exists and we don't do the upload. If it's something else, then we do the upload. Okay, all right. Okay, so then final thing we need to do is we need to make sure, we need to tell Gradle where the Git wagon plugin is. So we add the Maven dependency where you can find it. And then here comes the magic with a custom configuration. We make a custom configuration and then we can say, for this configuration, use this dependency. Because this is not a compiled dependency. It's not something we want to include in our actual artifact. It's just something we want to use to do the upload. Now, and this is then some boilerplate code. If you then want to do the actual release, just run this gradle command and you're good to go. Now, all of this can very easily be automated in a script. I already have the script. I just need to write a blog post and upload it online. So that will come soon. Just follow me on Twitter or something, and then you will see it appear straight away. But then also configuring a Git repository internally in your company would be a very straightforward thing, like we discussed with the previous things. Then to consume them, it's going to be very similar. You define the URL where your repository is, you provide credentials, and then again you can just start reusing it like we always did. These are the sources I used to provide this talk. So here you can find more explanations about everything. And then if you have any questions or anything you would like to ask me, I blog and I'm also on Twitter. So I hope you found this talk interesting. Do we still have time for questions or?
Actually, no.
No, okay, so you can just come to me after the talk in case you have any questions. And many thanks for coming to this talk.
Thank you very much.